Cyclone Donald was always going to hit Australia eventually, and today it made landfall with a 25% tariff hit on Australia's $1 billion a year steel and aluminium exports to the United States. Now, this has been coming for weeks, and it's nothing short of negligent that the Albanese government took no meaningful action to head it off. Now, sure, Foreign Minister Penny Wong went to the Trump inauguration. Defence Minister Richard Marles, well, he went off to meet his US counterpart with a cheque for nearly $1 billion towards those new Virginia-class nuclear subs that we might get early next decade. But given that the British Prime Minister, the French President, the Indian and the Japanese Prime Ministers, our AUKUS partner and our Quad partner leaders have all made the pilgrimage to Washington, it's less an unforgivable complacency, more a dereliction of duty that Anthony Albanese never went, and now it's too late. Certainly it's too late to avoid this hit on our hard-pressed steel and aluminium industries, already suffering from Labor's carbon tax by stealth, and now hit with even further costs in this big export market. Now, this is a PM who couldn't stay out of the plane, so much so he's called Airbus Albo, and yet he couldn't stir himself to meet personally with this most transactional and status-conscious president at a time when he might have looked respectful rather than desperate. Even though, as the toing and froing between the US and Canada shows, which today averted more tariffs on Canadian steel, the Trump administration can be persuaded to withdraw threatened measures if they're approached properly. Today, the Prime Minister said the Trump tariffs were, and I quote, not a positive step in our relationship with the US.
Such a decision by the Trump administration is entirely unjustified. Friends need to act in a way that reinforces to our respective populations the fact that we are friends.
The real power broker in the government, Penny Wong, well, she went further.
We think it is unprovoked and unjustified, and it's not good for the American economy, and it's not the way to treat a friend and partner.
Trying to shut down legitimate criticism of Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister said this is where everyone should be advocating, he says, for Australia's national interest. Right? Don't criticise me. But not, it seems, by actually doing it face to face, which any half-serious, half-diligent Prime Minister would have done, but not the one we actually have. So bad it was that the Prime Minister was even forced to admit he couldn't get his calls returned from the White House.
Are you disappointed that requests to have second phone calls with Trump couldn't be fulfilled? Friends should pick up the phone, shouldn't they?
We've engaged. We've engaged, including through writing, including at senior levels of the government. People would be aware. The Treasurer, the Trade Minister, a range of people, the Foreign Minister have all visited and have all engaged.
I think it's humiliating. I mean, I have been in the Prime Minister's office when you book the calls with the United States and when they come back into Australia from the White House. The fact that he couldn't get a call, I just find extraordinary. Now, Peter Dutton didn't miss when he called the PM weak and incompetent, because that call isn't just with the leader of the White House, the leader of the free world, it's with our most important and trusted ally.
It's obvious that Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd have had a shocker. The Prime Minister can't secure a phone call, let alone a meeting with the President of the United States. And how on earth can an outcome be negotiated if the President won't even take the Prime Minister's call?
Remember, it wasn't so long ago that Anthony Albanese went to town criticising Scott Morrison when the then Prime Minister couldn't get his calls returned by the Chinese leadership, when the commissars in Beijing slapped arbitrary bans on $20 billion worth of our trade.
What we need is a plan of intervention. It's not good enough to say, oh, well, no one will take our call.
At least Morrison tried. And Morrison's fight was with a regime that started a global pandemic. This guy, Albanese, hasn't even tried. Now, he can get on a plane and go to the tennis, he could get on a plane to watch his favourite Rabbitohs, but to try and save our steel jobs, he clearly couldn't make the effort. Now, sure, especially given the free trade deal that the Howard government did with the US FTA, the imposition of tariffs on a friend and ally under emergency powers Well, it's a low blow. A tariff is a tax on imports, pure and simple, that'll ultimately be paid by American consumers in higher prices for steel and aluminium, whether that's less efficiently produced local products or now the higher priced imports from places like Australia. But, and it's a significant but, if a country feels that it can't do without a particular local industry, it may be that tariffs are at least a potential way to ensure its survival. The new US administration wants to end America's dependence on imports in critical sectors, especially sectors that are vital to defence industries, which obviously steel and aluminium are. We would have had much more chance of getting an exemption if the PM had personally gone to Washington to explain that the main problem here is not our exports to America or Canada's or Britain, even those from the EU, it's Chinese exports. Because it's communist China that's exploited its admission into the global economy, thanks to Bill Clinton as US president, welcoming China into the WTO to become, in Clinton's words, and these words will haunt us all in the West, the factory to the world. Under the commissars in Beijing, China has stolen technology, manipulated markets, used secret subsidies to achieve a dominant position in many industries, including in the production of solar panels and wind turbines that our government foolishly thinks we need more and more of. It's China that's become critical to so many supply chains because domestic businesses, putting short-term cost reductions ahead of long-term national interest, have subcontracted so much of their immediate production to Beijing. President Trump wants to end the offshoring of American industries, to save blue-collar jobs and to boost America's economic resilience. Now, who can blame him? That's what he was elected to do. It's just that so far, he's hurting America's friends more than he's hurting its deadly rival in China. Now, the only way here to change any of this is to make the case respectfully and in person, not cowering in Canberra because you're weak and don't know that the only way to win over Trump is to get on a plane and cut a bloody deal.